This episode of Fragments of Silicon goes out to all the triskaidekaphobics out there.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon, the European interviews. Joining us this week is Piotr Gnyp.
Yes,
Uh,
hi. Thanks for
of,
having me.
no problem, of Walkabout Games. Um, right, so let's get into it. So, how we like to start things is by asking this question. And I suppose it's going to be double because of what we're talking about this session. And that is, what got you interested in both video games and tabletop RPGs?
Uh, well, my history, because I was born a long time ago in early late 70s, early 80s. So I started playing tabletop RPGs when I was a teenager. And I was huge fan of them. I played Warhammer, D&D, Ars Magica, Star Trek, Star Wars, all of this. We set up a club when we go and play it because it was really hard to get RPGs in Poland because of communist time stuff like that. So we got mainly some of them from abroad. I remember one guy got us the Call of Cthulhu, and he was Spanish, so the book was in Spanish, so he could lay it down on the table. Nobody of us understood anything, so he could do and tell us whatever he wanted, and we had to believe it. We also did like the first Polish translations of Warhammer, of Cyberpunk, of Cthulhu, and I think in '94, when I went to my first convention outside of my hometown, some guy like late at night told me about this amazing game which is happening now, and the vampires, werewolves, mages, and you can play, you can do stuff. And I was so intrigued that I bought it at my next convention, and I loved it immediately. So much that it literally changed my life. I soon started the first Polish Society of Fans of World of Darkness that got me as an editor for the World of Darkness section in the biggest Polish magazine about pen and paper RPG, from which I jumped into video games. So that's why I think I owe my professional career to Vampire, and that's why I'm buying every damn game they release with this brand, because I feel like I owe it. And now I'm mainly in the reading club of tabletop RPGs, but still love them because you know how hard it is to find a couple of hours with adult people to play RPGs. Yeah, but I remember once I sold my PC. It was 286 to buy more core rule books for Vampire. So
Uh, Now, was Vampire your favorite tabletop?
yeah, Vampire was my favorite. Well, all of World of Darkness, because we liked also other versions like Mage and Wraith. I always I have this love-hate relationship with Wraith because I think it's the most interesting one, but also the really hard to play, like this idea that every character is played by two players. One is Psyche, one is Shadow, that work together, but sometimes fight each other. So I think as a concept, it was awesome, but it was really hard, like for me, nearly impossible to execute during RPG session. So I would put Wraith at the top, then Vampire, but Vampire was the one that we played the most.
And they all use basically the same mechanical systems, just with different good and bad drives and different specific abilities, right?
Yes, but from our perspective and our experience, when you cross over them, so when you put a player from different system to your game, it might be difficult. Like you can see how mages can destroy everything, or how fast a werewolf can kill a vampire if they are in one room. So
Right.
yeah, but they all use the storyteller system based on 10-sided dices. They really nice translate to each other. So the best way for us was to play like one group of supernaturals and meet others as NPCs.
Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things about the World of Darkness for the tabletop RPGs is that at the time, most of the other ones were pretty combat based, and this was one of the first ones that had like just as much weight put on social abilities and stuff as it did
And
on
politics.
combat.
And politics. Vampire was mainly for us was mainly politics because there was this awesome core book called source book, sorry, called Princess Primer, which tell you about the politics. It was kind of based on Machiavelli, and they told you there how to play older vampires. So then you could see like that if you are immortal and powerful, the time is irrelevant. So mainly what you do, you jump into all of these political struggles to gain influence and kick people out of their positions or gain their territories. And the combat, like physical combat, is the least interesting thing in these games. But yeah, but putting the emphasis of your emotions, of the stuff that happens inside you, the struggle between your human, well, not human, but post-human nature and the new supernatural was really interesting. Like these vampires trying to regain their humanity or jump into other paths of enlightenment. Also, all of these amazing concepts like Sabbat, the vampires who embrace being something new or something more evolved and not trying to be like humans but dead, right? Was amazing. And also the sects and the concept of clans, that you didn't have like a class like in D&D or in Warhammer, like warrior, rogue, or mage, but you have your sect, and you could be anyone within a sect, right? This was also, I think, really refreshing and really fresh. And also, I don't know if you've seen the documentary about World of Darkness, which is available on the internet. You can rent it from, I think, Vimeo. That the idea of playing a monster was something like really new. You back then in the 90s, you played as a good guys. But then with the 90s, with all of the cyberpunk stuff, the gothic punk stuff, or the anti-hero comic books like The Darkness, the idea of playing the other side and showing you how human you can be, even if you're a monster, and how troubled you can be, or how your own life can suck. It was amazing.
I mean, maybe a bit of a correction there, because you could certainly play as evil people in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, like even back in the 80s. But
yeah,
I think World
Yeah,
of
but you
Darkness...
can't play as like literal monsters usually. That
Right.
they
I
didn't
think
start
the
really
closest-
doing rules for that until later editions.
Of course,
Yeah,
you could play in your campaign. You could play anyone, and your game master could do anything. But the core rulebook and the world was not built for that, right? It was like, okay, so now we're playing bad guys, and with White Wolf, back then White Wolf and World of Darkness, they said, okay, we are playing. This is a game about playing bad guys.
Right. I think that's the difference. Like the closest you could get to that in, say, old school Dungeons and Dragons was like the half orc.
Yeah.
But anyway, so on the flip side of things, how did you get interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
How could I not? Like, I think every teenager back then want to play video games. So I started with, I think, Spectrum, and because computers weren't that popular in Poland, but I always liked those two things, RPGs and computer games. Back in the days, I was also a Unix administrator and network administrator, because when I found out what's internet and how fascinating it can be, I also spent a lot of time back then on Usenet and on the IRC channels and typing in VI, if you know this editor, the Unix editor, the early web pages. So with this, and I played video games a lot, but still what I lacked with them was the variety of the story and the depth of the story and the linear path that you must take because of system limitations. But I think right now with the games, we're getting there when RPGs were in the 90s. So you can literally do anything and they look amazing and you can be immersed in the world. So yeah, and how did I get into the industry, the video game industry? It's because of, as I said before, about from the Vampire the Masquerade and me being like a guy for a vampire in Poland. So I met a lot of people during my tabletop RPG journalist times, and nearly all of them migrated to video games industry, to either CD Projekt Red or even brands like Ubisoft, stuff like that. So I get a lot of friends making video games, and they took me in to work on some of them in, I think, early 2000s, and that's how I started.
So you started at like Ubisoft?
No. I started with Metropolis. They were the guys who made some Polish games, and then they were bought by CD Projekt Red, and then some of the people that were involved in Metropolis were Adrian Chmielarz, if you know this guy, who made Wawańczykowy ten Carton, or what was this name called from Electronic Arts? Bulletstorm. He was a chief of Metropolis, and the guys who are now running 11-bit studios were also back then at Metropolis. Yeah, my friends were at Ubisoft. I never got that far.
I see. And how long were you at CD Projekt Red or Metropolis?
I was for 2 years. Back then, they had some financial troubles, so I skipped and went to do network stuff and Unix administration in some companies. But during this work, I also started a video game blog about video games. I think one of the first in Poland, and then this blog was bought with me by a huge publication called Gazeta.pl, and that's when I became a video game journalist for nearly a decade. And then from being a journalist, I jumped back into publishing, marketing, and PR side of video games.
Well, we've met a few other people who did the journalism thing, either in between or before jumping into the the development or business side of the equation. It's not that unheard of.
Yeah, it's fairly common because the traditional video game journalists, as we knew it in the 2000s, early 2000s, and even 2010, is dying out because people have access to knowledge outside of the media, and many companies can communicate with you better and quicker. And also with all the Web 2.0, Web 2.0, YouTube, stuff like that, that made many of the publications obsolete. And to be honest, if you look at the landscape now, there aren't that many journalists that are worth the read. You mainly read the news, right? And the news can be produced. Like there's this one awesome Twitter. I just saved you a click. I strongly recommend you to follow. Yeah. So they show you how the news doesn't need to be an article. It just 140 characters or 250 characters, and that's it. So in this world of a high-speed information, nobody wants to read 8,000 characters about announcements, right? So of course we need people to guide you through this stuff and write their opinions. I'm just saying that there aren't too many that are worth reading, but of course there are like the ones that you should follow and read.
Right. But in any case, so when you jumped back to video game development, was it to Walkabout, or did you apply elsewhere before ending up at your current position?
I started with video games e-commerce when I did content for video games, and then I jumped back to Walkabout. Yeah, so Walkabout is my first job in publishing.
Mm-hmm. And what is your official position at Walkabout?
I'm a head of BizDev, so I'm responsible for our partner relations and finding the ways to cooperate with other business entities while publishing games. But I also do a lot of marketing and PR because I really like it. So you can read me pretending to be werewolf on the Werewolf Apocalypse Hot Forest Twitter account, or read some of my stuff, or listen to the interviews about video games and tabletop RPGs that I do with people. Yeah, I just like talking about video games and games in general.
Right.
And in a sense, I feel like BizDev, marketing, and PR are just communications. You're just talking to different audience, right? With BizDev, you're talking to business partners. With PR, to the press, and marketing gives you the way to communicate with your customers.
I suppose it depends on the size of the outfit, because, we talk to a lot of indie people who, it's kind of one and the same.
Yeah. If you are not a huge company, then usually PR, marketing, and BizDev falls out to one or two people.
Yeah. But how big is Walkabout? How many people work there?
So with publishing side, we've got 7 people, but we started as a studio investor, so we built 3 studios. So we've got Polyamorous, which will release their first game called Paradise Lost early next year, I think. We've got Different Tales that made 2 Wanderlust games, and now Werewolf Apocalypse Heart of the Forest, and also Link, which produced a game called Liberated. So altogether, it should be around, I think, 50 people.
Oh, that's a fairly sizable outfit. Like,
but I said is we invested in some of these companies, so Walkabout Publishing is 7 people.
Right. And how long have you been with Walkabout?
I think it's around 2 years right now. I started just before the release of Wanderlust Travel Stories. So yeah, around 2 years.
Right. I suppose with most of the background filled in. I suppose before we get to the main event, we should touch upon some of the other games that Walkabout has put out. Stuff like Liberated and Wanderlust.
Mm-hmm.
What are these particular games for the uninitiated?
So they're really interesting and new because we're trying to do stuff on the borderlines of mixed genres. Mm-hmm. So you could see a lot of werewolf in Wanderlust. Wanderlust was a game with an interactive travel log. So it was a game about modern travel. One of the amazing developers that we have, Jacek Brzezinski, who was also the head of the Witcher 1 production in CD Projekt Red. He's a traveler. He's been to, I think, around 110 countries. And he always wanted to capture this feeling of traveling and show it to the people. So with the lead story designer of The Witcher 1, Artur Gęstrzeniec, they came up with a concept for Wanderlust Travel Stories, and they made this game, which are basically stories about travels. So with them, you go and by your choices, we measure your mood and we show you the world differently depending on your mood. You could see that in the Werewolf when we do this, but with your rage and your stats from the game, right? But the concept started with Wanderlust. I think the Trans-Siberian right now is free on App Store. So if you want to try it, just go and download and play. It's a standalone addition to Wanderlust Travel Stories. And with Liberated, we came up with a concept of playable graphic novel. So we wanted to give you the feeling that you are reading a graphic novel, but also sometimes you play a part of it. So you collect your issues of a comic book, you flip pages, you read through them, and sometimes you go into the frame and play a part as a character. And Liberated is cyberpunk dystopia, but it's more like vanilla cyberpunk. So you will see like the stuff like governments, people that watch your every step, gather the data, and you rebel against it. Mm. So less big stuff and neons, but more noir and depth of the story.
Okay. And, well, moving on to your most recent game.
An amazing game.
Yes.
Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest. Yes. I'm sorry, but I really, really love this game. We had the pleasure and honor to be the first ever video game released in this setting. There were, I know there were like 3 attempts before us, and they sadly failed. So yeah, we have an honor to be the first game ever released, and we released our game even before the 5th edition of RPG tabletop RPG will come out. So you could get a glimpse. If you haven't played the game, you could play our game and see what Werewolf is about, because this is in a sense the origin story when you play as human with a twist. I think the title of the game spoils the twist, but yeah, you are a werewolf, but you will get to know the society, the rules, the beliefs, and what is happening and why it is cool to be a werewolf.
Right, and this was my first question towards Werewolf the Apocalypse Heart of the Forest is, what made you want to do a game in, besides the obvious, being like the first Werewolf the Apocalypse game to exist, like, was there a specific intent to do a game here, or is it like you were in business contact with World of Darkness and they offered this up?
Yes, so we were offered a bunch of systems to choose from. But when we look at the world and what is happening, we saw like this is like because werewolf basically is a game about ecology, right? The werewolves like this tragic Greek, like a Greek tragedy about fallen warriors who want to who are fighting for Mother Earth, for Gaia, and they are losing. So if you see the world right now with all the stuff happening, it's just like we are living in the werewolf apocalypse scenario. And in 2016, we have this protest in Poland. The protesters were protesting the logging of one of the last primordial forests in Europe. So we said, like, guys, this is the werewolf scenario. We don't need to search. We don't need to imagine stuff. We have this in the newspapers. So yeah, this, and I think this is the most relevant system right now because of the stuff that is happening with climate change, stuff like that.
I see. Like, how do I put this? Good reasons, but also terrifying reasons to choose a scenario.
You know what? I always think a game as a medium to tell stories that are relevant, and how else you could do it. Like I'm proud that we not only did a fine game, but a game about something. So my perfect scenario is when you will finish our game, you will go and read what really happened in Poland and make your opinion.
Right, and
because these were like very complicated and delicate issues with how much can we be involved with the nature, how much can we interfere, and how much can we change it, and will the nature survive without our help? Because this forest had an infestation of a bug. And the discussion was between government and protesters. The government said we need to cut the rotten part off, like with a gangrene, right, the disease. And the protesters said, no, the forest will survive. Just let it be. So this is, I think, a complicated issue that everybody should read about, because this is the stuff that's happening, and these are the questions that we should be asking ourselves.
True enough. Yeah. But anyway, so was it a particularly difficult task in adapting the werewolf setting to? Well, I suppose we should establish what kind of game is this? Is this an RPG? Is this an action? Is this a visual novel kind of thing?
If you want to get a specific answer, the core genre is visual novel. But I think what we did, we go beyond it because we add a lot of RPG mechanics. You have a character sheet. Your character, you're building your character while you play. You can choose some actions because of the stats that you have. So for me, we did capture the experience of single-player tabletop RPG. And I know I'm bold, but I didn't feel this in any other game. So I felt like I'm playing with my game master, but my game master is my computer.
I think that's usually the thing that these kind of adaptations go for.
But I would argue that not many of them do it like we do. So you could see how your character is changing. You could see how the description is changing because of your stats. So I asked the dev team some time ago, like, guys, how many variations we've got in the game? So how many different paths can we take? And they started to counting, and we got to, like, of course, with even like really minor changes to 200,000, right? So we've got 5 main endings, but when you play it, because we measure all your stats and change the descriptions, your Maya main character can be really, really different person. So you might have a story about a girl who is really spiritual and she's open to new experiences, and she's got this weird dreams, comes to Poland and embraces the things that she's going through, right? Or a girl who's unsure about what's happening, she's frightened, paranoid, weird stuff is happening, so she pushes everything out of her life just to be alone. Yeah, so like in good session, your character can be really, really different. It's not like, are you going left or right?
Right. I mean, that's the arguable quintessence of a role-playing game.
Yeah. And for me, as an old tabletop RPG players, RPGs are the games about consequences. So you make choices, and you have consequences. And the mechanics of the game can be different. You can even have no mechanics, like in Amber, if you remember Amber tabletop RPG, when you didn't roll the dice, right? I had this discussion with one of the journalists, I think from, oh, I don't remember the outlet, but we have a discussion about what is an RPG. And for me, it's not about stats and dices. It's choices and consequences.
Right.
Because
I know.
the question that you hear the most when you're playing the tabletop RPGs, what do you do or how do you feel? Not what was your number in like strength or something, right?
I mean, it is in the name. You're playing a role.
Yeah. So if you play our game, you and there is a free demo. So I advise you, all of you, if you don't believe me, to go download the demo and check it out. That we managed to capture this feeling when you're playing a game of a gamer. So of course, the story must be limited because this is a computer game and not a game of imagination.
Right.
But since we put a lot of work into the art, which is like an art in the RPG core rule books, which is supposed not to show you what's happening, but fuel your imagination. So in a sense, the game takes place on the best HD screen, your mind, right? So you imagine things and you role play your Maya as you see fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that does beg an interesting question. Could you take the scenario that's presented in your game and, I suppose, for lack of a better term, reverse engineer it back into the tabletop game?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. And some people said that this is the awesome game zero when you can play this game and have your character ready for your World of Apocalypse tabletop RPG game. Because based on your choices, we design your character and make your character sheet. So you know what stats you should have in the RPG game.
Well, that's always neat. And I suppose, another question that should be asked is, what's been the response to Heart of the Forest, like from the fan base?
Amazing. We were stunned because we had like really high Metacritic rating. I think it's around 80 right now. We got a lot of reviews. I think about over 90% positive on Steam. With one negative that says the game is so cool, but it's a werewolf, so no. Yeah, but we've got a lot of really good vibes, and people seem to really like our game. And we were afraid because this is the game which is set in Poland, so it's kind of unusual for a video game, and it's about real issues, and we've got some tough choices, and this is a visual novel, so it's a game that you read. So even that we got, I think we were in the new and trending on Steam. We even got featured by the Steam, so the game is popular.
That's good to hear. And have the World of Darkness fans, have they given like direct feedback about the game, what they liked, what they disliked, and so on and so forth?
Yes, we had a lot of it. So some people didn't like how we, but of course, we have your game and your favorite clans or tribes as they are in Werewolf. So there were some discussions, some how the tribes were discussed or described. But we were also like, hey, these are the opinions of our NPCs in the game. So it's not like we are saying you what to think. We're just saying this character thinks this about that.
Right. Yeah, that's always going to come up.
But no, like many people were upset because it wasn't like a AAA computer RPG for 100 hours or action game, or that you couldn't choose a character. But I think we made right choices, and the game is quite unique. And you cannot make everyone happy. But as I said, we've got over 90% positive reviews on Steam, so I think that's something that can be proud of.
It sounds like you worked well enough with the license that the lion's share of people seem to be pleased with the product. But yeah, it's like there's always going to be people who didn't like X, Y, or Z, or saddened by omission of this clan or this mechanic.
Yeah. And why you cannot choose a character? Why you're playing as a woman, or I don't know.
So on and so forth. you
Yeah,
know,
but you have like all mainly our writers were female, so for them it was more natural to write from a female perspective. Like so, I
right.
didn't get this one, and there was like this comment like another game when a weak female is doing something like that. What weak female? You are like 6 feet tall, killing machine, a werewolf, so she is not weak.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it just kind of depends on the circumstances here.
Yeah, but with the IP that is so legendary and have so many fans, like we really like how passionate people can be about Werewolf and World of Darkness in general.
Right. I suppose another thing that we should ask is, do you have any involvement with the upcoming? I think it's Earthblood.
Yeah, so we love to talk over the Twitter, uh, and we talk to each other a lot, but there won't be, to my knowledge, any connection between two games other that they're both set in the same universe and the same setting.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And you could see like Earthblood is the game that will let you put out some steam. It will be an action game. You will go into rage and Krynos. Our game is more spiritual. Our game will let you discover the spiritual side, which is amazing of a World of the Apocalypse game. So you get to know all about cosmology, all about the society, the tribes, how you feel as a werewolf, how other werewolves act, how they can be different, and how the different points of view they can present, like in every other World of Darkness game.
Right. And you know, there's nothing wrong with having multiple games with the same setting. I mean,
Yeah, and I think that's awesome that World of Darkness came from like Oblivion after 10 years of silence, right? We've got like nothing until last year when the V5 came out, and the two games from our friends from Joe Distance were released, which is Coteries of New York and Shadows of New York.
Right. And of course, you know, there's the upcoming Vampire Bloodlines 2.
Yeah. But they are further down the road. So right now we've got two Draw Distance games, our game, and in February there'll be Earthblood and then Swanson, right? And they just announced this Battle Royale game.
Right. And now in regards to the new rule sets, I'm not sure how much you can detail at this, you know, if all
literally, really little. So I cannot talk about V5, W5, sorry, because it's a werewolf, W5, because it hasn't been released. But our game was accepted and we work really closely with the brand team. So our game is W5 ready, right?
Okay.
But I cannot talk about the changes at all. You could get a glimpse of them if you play our game, but we were specifically asked not to talk about W5 of edition of Werewolf prior to the release of the game.
So players will just have to decipher for themselves what might be changed by playing your game.
Yeah.
Like
there are some things that should, and some people notice some things in the game that are different. But yeah,
right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You need to ask Paradox World of Darkness brand team about this, not us.
Yeah. We know how that goes.
Yeah.
NDAs are NDAs. Like,
well, I really understand them. They want to be the ones that announce what will change in the V5. With our game, you could see some mechanics that would be common to all the editions. So rage, willpower, health, stuff like the tribes. And as I said before, our game was tested. We were close to the brand team, so it is accepted by them. So,
okay. And in terms of the music, is there music in Heart of the Forest here?
Well, in the game, yeah, we have some music and we have ambience audio to make you better imagine the stuff that is happening in the game. So we got sounds, some music, and ambience, and we've got 2 theme songs which are played by the end of the game. And one of them is from the Belarusian band because Białowieża Forest, so the White Tower Forest, is on the borderlines of between Poland and Belarus, singing about werewolf.
That seems appropriate. Yeah. Right. And so, is this game out on all computer formats, or is it just Windows only?
It's Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Okay.
Steam and GOG, and games. GeForce Now.
Mm-hmm. Any plans to come to the Epic Game Store?
Not that I know of, but we might have something to announce in some time.
Duly noted. And let me see. Any plans to bring Heart of the Forest to, say, mobile devices or the Nintendo Switch?
When I was a journalist, I loved this phrase. It would be a logical step for us.
I get where you're coming from.
But we would like our game to be on as many platforms as we can. I cannot say anything right now, but it would be a logical step.
Okay. Right. And before I see if my colleagues have any other questions for you, can you give us any word on what you might be working on next as a company? Are you going to be doing another Werewolf the Apocalypse game? Are you going to be doing another World of Darkness, something original?
So right now we just finishing. I know it's hard. I don't know how to phrase it to give hints and not to spoil stuff. So we are still working on Werewolf, the Heart of the Forest. Let me say it this way. But our teams, our internal studios, after finishing Liberated and Heart of the Forest, so we are doing some stuff with Werewolf and doing pre-production of other stuff.
Okay. And Petty, Gallix, do you have any other questions?
I think I covered most of mine.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. Peter, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today.
Thanks a lot for having me. As I said, please play Heart of the Forest. There's a free demo on GOG and on Steam. So you could see if I'm right and if my statement isn't bold, and we did manage to capture the experience of single-player tabletop RPG session.
Indeed. So the game is Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest. It's currently out on GOG and Steam for $14.99, or you can pick it up in the Different Tales collection for $31.47. And be sure to pick it up today. And if you're new here and you enjoyed what we had to offer today, be sure to subscribe and click all the notifications on Twitch and YouTube and all that. It's all the rigmarole that you need because they make it more difficult to get the videos and stuff. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to join us for our Sunday review session. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.
Thanks.